Beaming out across the galaxy, this is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello and welcome to the Free Zone. And I am so glad you have joined us this Saturday night, tuning in on freemantv.com and catching up on all the latest of mind control, understanding our world, and trying to get through this puzzle and finding solutions. And for that very reason, I have invited Cathy O'Brien to join us today to discuss some solutions, to discuss some ideas of trauma recovery, and even in the most deep-hearted feelings of soul recovery. Now, with their lives and liberty on the line, Cathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips released Transformation of America. Now, this book was hurriedly put out in a condensed testimony that was given in the courtroom to bring about the nefarious activities of our global leaders. This story is beyond belief. This story is one that you really have to take a close look at to really recognize what is going on planet Earth. Now they have released Access Denied for reasons of national security. And this is the rest of their true life story. And so many lessons were garnered from Cathy as she went through this experience, and we're going to talk about those today and hopefully share some solutions that we can find in that we are all under trauma. So Cathy, welcome to the Free Zone. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Freeman. I've been looking forward.
Of threat. We are all in a state of trauma and anxiety. We see what's going on around us, but we simply cannot understand it. With your story and the reversal of the awakening, now let me explain that, because you knew these people from the inside, and these people, I mean Gerald Ford, Bill Clinton, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., and the list goes on and on. People that have been in power since, well, I don't even know how many decades, 4, 5 decades, these same criminal elite have remained in power. And you were given a perception of these people from the inside. You saw these people as the heinous monsters that they really are. But as you became aware and awake and came out of, were deprogrammed by Mark and released from the restrictions of your mind control, you started to see the opposite side. You saw the public persona of these political leaders, and you had to suddenly understand what the rest of the public was going to learn in the future. Can you give us some advice as to what you went through in this awakening of realizing that the public saw these people as saviors to their nation or leaders that they should elect?
Well, in our book, Transformation of America, it details the the journey of how I was put under mind control. I was targeted for mind control because I had been sexually abused as a child, and then I was used in child pornography as well. So, and then my father started prostituting me to his friends and people that were within my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge. A Blue Masonic Lodge is kind of a group of local politicians and police, like you mentioned, and all like that. And within that Blue Masonic Lodge was local politicians at that time. It was Guy Vanderjagt and Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, of course, went on to become the unelected president of the United States. It was known then that when a person endures trauma, then the way the brain responds to that trauma is it's as though the conscious mind doesn't have a place for it, so it takes flight, and the subconscious mind is just left wide open to be manipulated and easily led. That is a known fact, so children like myself were being targeted for mind control. It had been determined through the Hitler-Himmler research that multi-generationally abused children were more easily led, and it was also determined through what the Catholics had learned through the Spanish Inquisition and the Crusades, the effects of trauma on the human mind. So these were known facts. This was not an experiment. And even though I was just a small child in the very early 60s, mind control was already in full swing, had been brought into the U.S. government through Project Paperclip, and they, when my father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails, Gerald Ford approached my father and told him he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would sell me into the project. And my father agreed to that, and as soon as he agreed to it, he became extremely wealthy over the years, but as soon as he agreed, he was flown to Boston, Massachusetts, which is the crux of the Catholic child abuse scandal, because they were participating with the CIA for traumatization of children. The traumatized mind, again, is easily led, and so there was a very deliberate effort to further create trauma on my mind through occult ritual. And, of course, that's extremely traumatic, and when animals are hurt, that's just horribly traumatic, too. And it's a horribly hard thing for anybody to deal with. So those were the basic traumas that I was exposed to that ended up thrusting me into mind control, and to the point where I was taken to various military and NASA installations for programming. It's how I ended up working on a White House Pentagon level during the Reagan-Bush administrations. Of course, all those details on how that unfolded is detailed in our compiled testimony, Transformation of America. But we're talking about solutions today, and the solutions are in access denied for reasons of national security. Access denied tells how Mark, who rescued my daughter and I out of that our mind-controlled existence, how Mark and I survived to be able to bring information to light, not only identifying the problem and how that the government, the criminals, this criminal faction in control of our government that you mentioned, knows the effects of trauma on the human mind. So when trauma occurs to our nation, like it did with the Kennedy assassination, like it did 9/11, when that happens, then they know that the people are traumatized and their subconscious mind is wide open to be easily led, and that is when the government takes more control over the minds and lives of the population as a whole. So we need to be aware of the fact that traumas have been deliberately inflicted on society. They have been used in a way that has given government more and more control over the people, when in fact it really needs to be downsized. But having been exposed to the criminal operations my experience is that there's a very deliberate plan for controlling the population, for ushering in what Adolf Hitler and George Bush termed the New World Order, which is a robotic kind of society where they have only the elite and then the people to carry out the menial tasks or do the work. So that has been a plan that's been in place for some time. That plan is eroding, and it is eroding because awareness is rising. People are becoming aware of what's really going on in our world, and as I said at the very beginning, knowledge is our only defense against mind control. It is the truth that makes us free, and when you understand the components of mind control, then people all over the planet are taking back their minds, their lives, and their path that they choose. Once they gather their strength of spirit, they can begin reclaiming their minds and lives. The same way that Mark taught me when he did rescue Kelly and I out of that situation. The exact method for how to reclaim your mind and life is detailed in Access Denied.
It absolutely is, and deeply detailed, and naming so many names. Obviously, you know what you're talking about. And the truth is that this information is reaching the surface, and this is critical, and it is frightening the elite as things start to come to light, like this recent CNN article. Theme park employees caught in sex sting, child porn arrest, all right? So just days after getting arrested in a child sex sting, Robert Kingsolver is a long way from his beloved job at Walt Disney World. Inside his home in Orlando, he sits in an empty room because he's no longer allowed to have a computer or have any children near him. Now he says, my life is ruined. My family's life is ruined. My kid's life is ruined. I've devastated my parents because of my bad judgment. He is just one of the 35 Disney employees arrested in this sting since 2006 and accused of these sex crimes. 5 Universal Studio employees, 2 employees from SeaWorld. All of these theme park employees caught in a child porn ring. And it's right there on the front page of yesterday's news.
I'm so glad you shared that. Mark and I have been blowing the whistle on the Disney aspect of involvement in mind control for over 20 years now. I mean, it's something that's gone on for far too long. It's got to stop. It's got to be stopped. And again, awareness is starting to make that change. It came out a few years back that there's actually a military installation on Disney World. Why would our military have an installation there? It's because it really kind of gets to the root of why mind control is being censored for reasons of national security. It's actually a top secret weapon system. It is used on our military and by our military. So it's very pervasive in our whole military operations. So many are sent to Disney World for conditioning and mind control programming. It's a huge mind control epicenter. It's rooted in abuse. It's rooted in the abuse of children. It's rooted in the children who may grow up and go into the military, and it just furthers the traumas that they're exposed to. And how that is done is the more you know about mind control, the more you see, and the more you see how Disney fits in with that. Of course, anybody just needs to pick up weird stuff, and they're going to get a clear idea of how and why Disney is involved in what is being used there. So,
well, thank you so much for that. And for those of you who don't know, Weird Stuff is our book that Jamie and I put out, trying to highlight and give you a tool to share this information with your friends. We've written it for the layman and the expert alike, and it's hopefully going to be a tool, just like today's show, to share this information with your friends, because that's where we're at now. Cathy, you've been speaking for 20 years. You've been out there. We'll get to talking about rolling around in your Pacer and how much trouble it was for you to get copies and to make things come to light back in the day, pre-internet, pre-World Wide Web. But
that did make a big difference,
doesn't it? I mean, my God, you guys were there trying to get your papers printed out, copied, and well, let's just talk. I wanted to get into some Disney movies and the ideas that are transferred and the understanding of mind control that is being implemented through the movies. But right now, let's just talk about how people cannot find the good in humanity and how much that has been hidden from us. So here you were, an absolute believer that there was nothing good at the top. You didn't know who to go to, who to trust, and it seemed that the people you did trust turned on you. But you did find good, and it changed your perception. And I think this is something that we need to start to understand, because people are making judgments based on these past conceptions, and we really don't believe in any good at the top at this point.
Well, in my life's experience, from early childhood, as being, it was incest and abuse right there at home. So I wanted to go to someplace safe, and school seemed to be that. So the way the brain deals with trauma is it will repress trauma, something that's so emotionally incomprehensible that there's no place for it in the brain. It'll section it off and suppress it. That's what repressed memories are. That's why people sometimes will wonder, usually around age 30 or something, when electrochemical changes happen in the brain, about trauma that has happened to them. And it's just kind of the way the brain works. It compartmentalizes it that way so the rest of the mind can function normally. Well, I thought school would be the place, but school was using specific testing for targeting children for mind control, and it's stronger today than it was even when I was a child, because now we've got Common Core, global education in the school system, which, having been exposed to the education secretary during the Reagan administration, this education system is deliberately designed to increase children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. And that's what's happening in our school system. Well, at that point, I realized, I can't turn to school. And then my father was prostituting me to police, and I couldn't turn to the police for help because I was being abused by them too. And then couldn't turn to any politicians because obviously the politicians were involved too and were what thrust me into the CIA's MK Ultra mind control program. And then I couldn't turn to my church. I was being raised in Catholic church, and that was heavily involved in child abuse. I mean, the scandal is absolutely rocking the church now and shaking it to bits at the moment. And it's about time the truth of that prevailed. But I couldn't turn there either. So I lost all hope. And as I went into mind control, my last free thought was that I hoped there was some place in the world where people were good to each other and where abuse wasn't going on. And then throughout my victimization and mind control, of course, I robotically did exactly what I was told to do. And when Mark came along and rescued my daughter and I out of the situation, that was not, it wasn't enough for me to just suddenly be able to trust somebody or to have any hope. I didn't even know how to have a conscious thought at the time. But what happens when the conscious mind takes flight and the subconscious is left to be easily led. It's as though the brain is expanded and then blasted. I was like blasted into other parts of my brain that were had heightened senses, much the way a blind person hears better. I had heightened senses for intuition and for the kind of telepathic communication that you would have with an animal. It's an example of why people who are abused oftentimes will be the ones who are veterinarians. They work with animals or whatever because they do have a heightened ability to connect with animals. And I couldn't think trust Mark, but he had all these animals around him. He had fox and raccoons and all these pets, and they all loved him and trusted him, and they'd climb on him and pat him, and just they loved him so much. So even though I couldn't think to trust Mark, I could sense to trust him because the animals did. And in my life's experience, people who abuse children abuse animals. And everybody, it was all I knew is people abused animals. I loved them so much, and I was so connected with animals, but I couldn't, I couldn't rationalize or think of why what was happening to them was. But it's just the way people do. But I could sense, like they sensed, and that was the first step towards my healing, was to be able to trust. And once I was able to trust, Mark was able to hand me the methods that are detailed in Access Tonight for reclaiming my own mind and my own life by writing out memory. And what writing out memory does is it takes the logic part of the brain to move a pen. So it takes all this emotionally incomprehensible trauma, shifts it over to logic, where when it's being written out, it can suddenly be consciously comprehended. And when you consciously comprehend, then there's no need for repressed memory anymore, and the brain doesn't have to compartmentalize it anymore. So after I wrote out my memory, and I was like a blank slate then, because I had to learn to think for myself. I had to learn to think beyond what I had experienced in my traumatic MK Ultra mind control experience. Well, looking around, I saw that people were socially engineered, which is that mass mind control that I was referring to, the kind that happens when trauma happens in society, when there's mass shootings that, you look at the school shootings that are going on right now, and, check around, there's military connections all over the place with that. And so what that is doing is it's deliberately traumatizing a community. It deliberately traumatizes a nation, and it starts eroding people's hope and their belief in humanity, when in fact it's all an illusion that has been created. Once my eyes were opened, and once I began thinking, Mark told me that there's really good people in the world. There's way more good people than bad. And it was like, yeah, right, I got to see this, because after my experience, that was really hard to believe. But when I started understanding what was being done to the population, I realized that most people simply weren't thinking free to live the love they are. They weren't thinking free to innately live truth, to live peace. Instead, they were living fear. And in that fear, again, it's where people are easily led. They become this fearful population, and they're being misled by a government with an adverse agenda that is not in the best interest of humanity. So there's a lot of hope out there. It's one that when people understand mind control, how it works on an individual, how it works on a society, that they'll begin to see truth. And this truth that makes us free is full of hope and possibility, and there's so many wonderful things in life to explore. There's so much more to life than what we're misled to believe is dominant in life with the kind of violence and all that we've been conditioned to through video games and through television. That's it's all been done to manipulate our minds, and once people realize that, the freedom that comes with it is so exciting. It's like now, every day I celebrate the freedom to live true to soul, the freedom to live the love that I am, the freedom to make a positive difference in this world wherever I choose, whether it's in volunteering locally for environmental issues, volunteering locally for local politics, where we can actually see what's going on and, make sure we have clean people around us. Becoming active in a community is a wonderful way to be able to start making the positive difference right where you are, and showing other people that they too can reclaim their hope and their freedom and their strength of spirit and begin living the way that humanity was meant to all along.
I absolutely know how hard this can be. I've certainly been one that's been trying to prove to people the goodness of humanity. I even took a big yellow school bus around the entire United States and met nothing but strangers all along the way, staying in their homes, sharing their food, sharing their kindness, and transmitting this all through FreemanTV.com all the while in hopes that people would see the miraculous, the synchronicities, and all of that. But on the other side of the spectrum, I am also a person filled with fear. You might not know this, and it might shock some listeners, but I am. I have been through a lot of trauma. I seriously have been bullied, beat up, mugged, kidnapped, incarcerated, chased, homeless, kicked out, lived on the streets. I've been through most of the I can't quite call myself average, but the average person trauma. And currently, I live in a place in my mind where every time I have to deal with the bureaucracy, if I have to go down and fill out for a Social Security card, or if I have to go get my driver's license, I am sitting there with my heart pounding, my palms sweating, and I am panicked. Because I have been abducted on many levels by official organizations, and I don't trust anyone. What advice do you have to kind of get us? Because I believe everyone lives in this perpetual fear of not making enough money to pay the bills, of trying to keep their children safe, of just trying to navigate the madness that is life in the United States. And we're about to go down, it seems. It seems to me the economy is crashing. We're all going to need one another. So do you have some advice for me and for the listeners that are in this same sort of turmoil of how we can kind of get back to our happy soul place?
Oh, that's wonderful. I love the way you worded that, and like so many, obviously you've been through a lot. This is a traumatic planet, it really is. Our innate being, though, I think the greatest way to deal with anything is to be able to write it out. Oftentimes, if people have repressed memory, it will be an undercurrent within them where it starts intruding on their present in negative ways, with self-doubts, with unknown anxiety, some fear that is coming in from somewhere, because oftentimes people who don't know their own truth, their own life's experience, the ones who haven't brought up those repressed memories, they tend to fear a lot more because they don't know what is the root cause of it inside. Exactly. So by writing out memory, that will help everyone. Everyone everywhere should be picking up a pen and writing out memory, whether it's their timeline, to see if they have any missing time, any gaps in their memory, because those are the ones that are repressed that need attention. But aside from that, just make a little timeline of it. And if there is no childhood trauma, no repressed memory, and life's a magnitude of all that goes on day to day with the constant bombardment of social engineering, the running and running to try to make ends meet financially, or whatever the issue is that causes discomfort, it's good to still write. And Mark taught me in the very onset of healing, voice no negatives without a solution. What that does is it stopped me from voicing fears. It stopped me from just complaining on and on and on, or whining on and on about what happened to me, or thinking in negative terms. Because, boy, it is so easy. You get hold of one negative thread just to follow it right on down that rabbit hole and keep on going, and then bring all this other negative in it, and it taints the whole view of life. So to have to think of a solution first before you voice the negative causes you to have to think in a different way, in a different light. And whether the solution's viable or not, the fact is you are physically exercising your brain to think in terms of a positive solution. That's very helpful. These days, when I get really frustrated or upset with news of the moment or something like that, I'll pick up a pen and write a poem. I'll write a poem about it and vent it out, you know. It may not have the solution right there in it, but then I will take and make a deliberate effort to think of something positive. I learn to choose my thoughts, and that's something that everybody can learn to do, to expand their thinking. One way to be able to do that, aside from, you know, writing a poem or something like that, would be to get out and walk in nature. Take a walk. What happens when you walk is you're working both sides of your brain as you walk. And doing that is going to take you out of a negative spot. Plus you're getting light in your eyes. Plus you're reconnecting with nature and with earth. And it's a very important aspect for all of us to be able to do that. One of the most healing things that we can do for ourselves is to be able to just get out, take a walk, be in nature, reconnect with nature, realize nature's our nature, and be at peace with that. Another really nice thought that comes with that is that, you know, most people will work their tails off all their lives, you know, working how many jobs or whatever so they can get to retirement and have time to get out and go fish and or camp or get out in nature. You know, hey, nature's here. Let's enjoy it every day. If you're out walking and the place is littered or something, choose to pick it up. Get involved in an environmental group or something. Or there's environmental things that are being taught kids in school now so that they can respect their environment more and stop the littering. But to be able to just take and make a positive difference where you are is real important. If you pick up one piece of trash, it might save a wild animal from getting tangled in it or choked on it or something, you know? And you've made a difference. When we start reaching out of ourselves, that's another good way to stop from getting caught up in hopelessness and in negativity and fearfulness and everything else. Make a difference where you can. Reach outside yourself. Help somebody. Just make a small positive difference in a way. It might just be a smile, you know? Sometimes just the right word at the right time to the right person can make all the difference for them. And it's important to look outside of ourselves to give. You know, it's our nature to have a more giving heart. There's joy to giving. And I'm not talking about like giving to a charity that's, you know, somebody's going to scam you about. I'm talking about just giving of yourself, whether it's a minute of your time or just a smile, just a moment of kindness. I think it's important, too, like, for example, when our military comes home, they're PTSD, they're having a heck of a hard time. And right now, Mark and I are thrilled that they've even acknowledged PTSD for our military. We worked for years to even get that acknowledged. And now something needs to be done about it. They need to be handed the simple tools of writing out memory, how to expand their thinking, and the healing details and methods like are in Access Denied. And then something else they can do maybe that's working really well for a lot of our PTSD military is they adopt an animal. They adopt them from a shelter or wherever they need adopting, and maybe do an animal rescue. But all of a sudden they have something other than themselves to be responsible for. They're going to have to reach outside themselves to take care of something else. And the unconditional love and companionship that a dog can give is very heartwarming and very comforting. And even though, in itself it's not the answer to all problems and all fears, it's still a nice component and another step towards reclaiming our peace of mind, control over our own society, and the ability to choose our thoughts and move forward in a productive way rather than get bogged down in the negativities of today.
Absolutely. So many people want to lash out at this point. They're trying to find the enemy, but they can't see him, and then they lash out at everything that just seems off to them. I get plenty of attacks along the way. People are in that position right now where they just they're on a witch hunt and they don't care which witch is which, and we really need to get this information out to people so that they can see that this is not a human experience. This is an elitist experience that's being imposed upon us, and we can do a whole lot better. Every year I would go out to what is known as the Rainbow Gathering. And this is where 20,000 people would gather in a national forest. It's been going on since the early 70s. And they would form this intentional community in the national forest, building kitchens and playthings and fairylands and bridges and towers and just anything you could think of. The creative mind was free. Now, what I witnessed at these rainbow gatherings on numerous occasions, and I think that we could use this as a salvation tool for us here. So I want to know what you think. As I go to these gatherings, when you're there, first of all, there's no money and no alcohol allowed. These are really the only two rules inside of Rainbow. You learn quickly that a community or tribe self-regulates itself, that the crime and the violence and things of this nature are minimalized to near null because the tribe is there, because you can't get away with anything. And then on top of all of this, all of your food is supplied, your bed is there, and you are constantly surrounded by people telling you they love you. Now, what I have witnessed is common, average, ordinary, middle-class youth start to shake and shiver there in the woods. Even though it's hot, and we're talking July, they start to shiver, they start to shake. And what I see, what I believe is occurring, is that the trauma that they've been withholding all this time is beginning to release from their bodies. And their teeth chatter. I've seen this over and over again. And they panic as this happens. And I am there to console and comfort and tell them what's happening to them as their trauma is releasing from their body. Now, how difficult would it be to bring this rainbow mentality to your own neighborhood so that when you walked out your door, you knew you could step over to your neighbor's house and have a quick bite to eat, or just see what's going on with them, share an experience with them. And right now, we are all so isolated. None of us get to share anything. We don't go and know our neighbors. We don't have block community gatherings. And I think that is one of the simplest ways and one of the most effective ways that trauma could start to be released as you start to learn that you're going to be taken care of.
Absolutely. That's wonderful, Freeman. I love that whole concept and idea. And it wasn't until Mark took me to the safety and serenity of Alaska that I felt safe where I began remembering. So when people are in a safe, loving environment, that's when any repressed memory would begin to surface. That is when their whatever trauma they have might start to flash across their mind screen. They might have just a quick flash of a memory, or flash of something scary. And at that point like that, the best thing to do is just take a pen and make a note of that flash. And then later, when you're in a safe, relaxed state, just to be able to begin writing out the memory and follow that thread that was flashing. The reason it's flashing is because it's like your brain has a mechanism where it doesn't have to do with our psychological makeup or what we think we know. It's a scientific, actual firing of neuron pathways, and when a person is safe and relaxed, those will start to open, and as they begin to open, the memory would come up, and so it'd be good to make a note at that time. The best thing about making a note of a flash is it will stop that. It will put the fearfulness aside, and it will allow you to enjoy the experience of the moment, because it sounds like, in a situation like that, a person really should just be present for all the positive joy that's happening there, where people are free to express kindness to each other. They wouldn't want to spend the whole time writing memory per se, but at least get the little flashes written so that later on they can follow that and completely heal and free that whole part of their brain, so the next time when they're out in the woods, they just simply have the peace of enjoyment of the whole experience.
Yeah, it's true. We really don't realize the amount of trauma and stress that we're under. I don't think any inhabitant of this planet has ever had to deal with the amount of stress the 21st century brings.
I agree, and the conditioning that we're getting through the controlled medias, the conditioning that we get even on, so-called family vacation, the Disney World type things, the stresses and the horror and trauma of video games, that's really hard on people. The video games originated from the military, where the military was using them to teach how to point and shoot without a conscious thought or compassion or consideration for what's happening. It's a reactionary, point and shoot. And now that is pervasive in our society. Come on, people, let's just reclaim our lives and restore some peaceful solutions back into our lives, our schools, and make some good choices what we listen to in music, what we do put into our heads. It's our body, our minds, our brain, our choice. And people need to reclaim that and start choosing to become, to live the love they are, who they are innately inside themselves,
It was historically difficult to get humans to kill other humans.
Yeah.
This was quite
exactly.
They had to come up with all kinds of mind control methods to finally get the killer instinct into people, or to get them to blindly kill even without instinct. So yeah, absolutely. It's just not the natural state of the human to be this type of warrior or warmonger.
If that was the natural state of humanity, mind control wouldn't be needed.
Right.
If it was a natural choice of someone like myself, the criminal covert operations I was forced to work on a White House Pentagon level is something I never, ever would choose to do. That kind of criminal activity needs to be exposed and stopped. Once a secret operation is brought to light, it's no longer secret, and that's when we can make a positive difference with it. So it's just a matter of people, waking up and reclaiming their innate being. When I woke up from mind control, I didn't know, I didn't have a perception of self, because I had been controlled for, really 30 years. And waking up people would say, "Oh, you've got to forgive your abusers," and people always had advice like that. And people would say, "Oh, you need to love yourself." Well, to forgive my abusers was to condone their actions, not only against me, but against society as a whole. And I don't condone that. I would rather turn that negative into a positive by raising awareness. My love for humanity is what's important. I understand my abusers, like my father. I don't have any bitterness. I don't live in negativity and hatred or anything like that, because I understand that he was abused as a child and he was acting out the way that he had been conditioned to. He didn't really know any better. Well, man, you take something like that on society as a whole, and we need to remind people to know better, to go back to who they innately are. I couldn't tell myself, "Oh, I love myself," by looking in the mirror and doing daily affirmations or something. That was not working. It wouldn't work for me. So what I did is I went to the very core of my being, the very essence of all that I am, of who I am inside, the essence of my spirit, the very base core energy of my spirit, and that's love. And so rather than have to tell myself how to act, or tell myself what I'm supposed to be, I just said, okay, I am love, and I'm going to live the love I am. If everybody was free to look within themselves on that deep of a level to consider the essence of their being and live that, then humanity, oh God, it's not too late for humanity to reclaim their lives and their true path of what we should be. When Mark and I were speaking all over the world, blowing the whistle on mind control, we spoke to huge groups of people from all over the world, even members of the United Nations that there are members even within them that are concerned for the welfare of humanity. There are people in all levels of government here and there, and it was the hardest for me to believe, and in intelligence that want people to have free thought and to be able to live the love they are. But in our travels and going around and speaking to all these different people, Mark and I had the luxury and latitude of an experience in Fiji that I wish every person on the planet could have. Fiji is an island nation that had no electricity. They had no churches that were allowed to come in. They ran the churches out faster than they could even set up a structure or, make an offer of that they'll help them like the Catholics do, with really poor nations or whatever. They didn't want any part of any of that, and they just turned people away. They have nothing to war over. They have no capacity for that. They didn't have television invasion. They didn't have invasion through regular music. It was just a little remote area that was so far remote that it was untouched. And these people are extremely intelligent, deeply wise, very telepathic, loving, happy, understanding people that when just seeing their structure, just seeing how humanity evolves without social engineering is it's so deeply encouraging. I wish that's a view that every person on the planet had so that we could all begin to reclaim our birthright to a free and peaceful life.
Yeah, we're planning on getting into that in Weird Stuff Part 3 and the concepts of that the social engineers that came over from England and Spain to America found a utopia with the Native Americans, found that they were not in need of anything. There was no poverty. There was no slavery. There was no suffering. For the most part, people were happy, well taken care of, and well oriented. And yet they came in and said, we need to force this religion, these concepts on you, this social engineering. And what the big difference was, the Native Americans had a culture of their own, and they had genetics of their own. And they could look at one another and see who was in their core group and know where their culture stood and be able to stand on their culture. But now we've had this generation after generation of disassociation from our own selves that we don't know who the members of our tribe are. We don't even know that they're out there, that we have other people like us.
That's so true. And on the Native American aspect, that really, I just love the values and the wisdom that they impart regarding animals, because rather than trying to control nature and all like that, they watched the harmony within nature, and they were able to get positive messages by watching animals and how animals interact with each other. They have one language, really, where they all know what's going on. And when a person gets out and really attunes to nature, they'll begin to see some of what has been lost all this time. Again, that's another good reason to get out in nature, because nature is our nature. There's a lot to be learned from it that's very positive, reflective of the wisdom of the ancients, and reflective of our innate beings that we need to get back to. So it's I love the wisdom that they had arrived at, and I still like to look into that when I'm choosing my thoughts to think in a more positive direction. Sometimes it's not looking in the future, it's looking way back into ancient times before we became so tainted by cult religions and people that wanted to control each other, for whatever reason.
Right. And as I was saying, this has been generations now of us taking this through. And the BBC reported last year that memories do pass between generations. Now, of course, this was the concept behind the monarch programming, the idea that a monarch, it takes 3 life cycles to get back to their mating grounds. How does the third generation know where to go if they've never been there? And this idea has now reached a scientific crescendo, and it's made it to the news. BBC reporting that behaviors can be affected by events in previous generations which have been passed through in the form of genetic memory. And they're, of course, using animals to test all of this to find that they can train them to fear a smell. Of course, this is the same idea of having a plastic owl on top of a building to scare off birds. Not that they've ever been attacked by an owl, but this genetic memory. So now we have whole nations filled with people who have been genetically modified through social engineering. And this goes much deeper than just our minds, right?
You're so right, and it takes 3 generations for it to become an autogenic response system. And we have had 3 generations, definitely, of mind control when you consider that the criminals that are in control of our information and in control of our country have been in power for at least that long.
It's ungodly how long. I mean, the list of people that you have in your book written in Transformation, I don't know what year that came out.
95.
95. And it's all the same names and faces. Dick Cheney, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, on and on and on.
It has been all my life. Look at Gerald Ford's cabinet, where he had Donald Rumsfeld as his Secretary of Defense. And, of course, Donald Rumsfeld has been in the position of Secretary of Defense. What the heck? It's so offensive what we do, and the fact that he's been responsible for the poisoning of the minds of the masses through aspartame, for example, or aspartame, or however people want to pronounce it, that was a Monsanto and Searle drug that actually dumbs people down, But keep rather than listening to what these politicians say, look at what they do. Look behind the scene a little bit. Follow the money. See what they're really up to. But anyway, we had Donald Rumsfeld. And then, of course, he had Dick Cheney. in his cabinet as well. And Dick Cheney's just been very strong behind the scene and in the scene for my life, my whole life, really.
Right.
And so was Robert C. Byrd. He was head of appropriations and held the purse strings of our country, like up until he died not too long ago. And of course, it's very important to mention the fact that Gerald Ford had George Bush Sr. as head of the CIA.
I know.
I mean, how many of these same people do we have to see over and over and over before we get it that they don't belong in power? It just blows my mind that people would even think of considering putting Hillary Clinton in when she's already, been taken out of position for corruption as the Secretary of State. What do people need to see? They need to see that we are following leaders that we're not even electing. Follow the money on the electronic voting machines, and it goes right back into the Bush-Cheney family, and it goes into the same people that are even controlling the elections. When I was used on a White House Pentagon level, the politicians I was exposed to were not ever the least bit concerned about elections. They weren't the least bit concerned about campaigning for elections. They already knew that the spin was being put out there through the medias and that they were going to have the elections totally controlled anyway. So it's not like, we need to be aware of who's who so we can elect, think we elected our next illusion of change. Like Obama was our illusion of change, and Hillary is going to be paraded again as an illusion of change. These aren't change. We need to stop following leaders we don't elect, people who are running us in a direction that has nothing to do with our innate birthright of integrity, strength of spirit, and living true to soul. And we need to just start being people helping people. Maybe if there's a positive to come from an economic collapse, it will be, hey, people are going to be helping people again. We're all going to have to extend a hand and start helping each other.
Absolutely.
Because that's where things matter. It doesn't take money to enjoy nature. It doesn't take money to extend a hand and care for each other.
No, you'll see far more kinship and kindness coming from the poor and giving than you will from anyone that has the means to give. That's
right. It's not that I would like to just, finger point and say this politician, this, because they are dying off. And eventually, surely to God, the Cheneys and the Bushes are going to be gone, And we need to pay attention to the agenda and how it works, to understand our own brains, to know that information on mind-brain function has been deliberately suppressed from society. It's been deliberately suppressed from mental health through Dr. Ewan Cameron, who is the founder of the APAs. And as founder of the American Psychiatric and Psychological Associations, that's a worldwide measuring stick of mental health abilities or whatever. All the information on mind control was repressed and kept out of the public eye because it was being used as a top secret weapon system. And Ewan Cameron was very high up in MK Ultra, and he has actually they've had to pay out to some of the Canadian victims even for what went on there. But anyway, Ewan Cameron is one of the main people that was deliberately repressing how our brains respond to trauma from the population so that trauma could be used to control the population. And in in controlling that information, the healing from trauma information has been suppressed too. People have a right to know how to help each other get over trauma, how to get over fear, how to not be fearful when you're just going in for a basic appointment somewhere, having to deal with people. We should not have to be fearful. People should not have to fear their government on any level, and especially not locally.
Absolutely.
By understanding how our brains work, we're going to be able to reclaim control of our minds and lives. And the access denied, much information was released in there on what, like, adverse things that mental health has been misled to believe, so that people really aren't being helped that go into therapy or whatever. That it's not helping them deal with their PTSD. It's not helping them overcome their fears because the information was suppressed from mental health. Mark and I go around now teaching mental health professionals about this information. Mark saw it because he was a government insider working in mind sciences throughout his career in the intelligence community. So he has a great deal of information on mind-brain function that he's releasing publicly through both Transformation of America and Access Denied. And, of course, I'm releasing what helped me heal from the extreme torture and trauma that I endured for mind control. Because healing is possible on all levels, no matter what the brain or the mind or the person has been through. All of it can be healed. And the truth, again, is what makes us free. And we've got to get more and more of that information out there just so people can reclaim their peace of mind.
Yes, and you are a testament to that, absolutely. I wanted to get this out because I think this is an important statement that you have in there, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what you meant by it. You said in Access Denied, if people knew what death is really about, they would begin enjoying lives instead of running from death.
Absolutely. Well, having been tortured and endured near-death experiences, I've peeked over that edge. I have absolutely no fear of death. And I think that's probably why I don't live in fear of really anything today. They say that all fear is rooted in a fear of death. That might be true because I have no fear of death and I do not live in fear. I don't find any need to live in fear. There are so many beautiful aspects to life that are just to be celebrated that there's really not time to have to, dwell on fear. Knowing the truth has freed me from that fear, and I think that I wish that everybody could see what I saw and experience what I did in that regard, because it's like when I was being tortured, my spirit would take flight, and it would be in a safe, loving space. We hear people talk about near-death experiences where they have an overview of what's going on, where it's as though their spirit is looking from above, and there's a tiny thread that connects them to that body. And in some ways, it defies words, it defies explanation. But while my spirit was in that safe, loving space, I did have an overview look. I was removed from what was happening to me. So my spirit was never tortured. My spirit was never touched. To me, soul is an expression of spirit. And when a person is tortured and mind-controlled, they don't have soul expression. And without soul expression, there's no conduit for spirit to be expressed through the physical body. It's like, to me, spirit is or soul would be spirit on earth, to be expressed through a physical body. And that is actually detached and disconnected. I was forced to do things there's no way that I would do. And now that I am in this body and I do have strength of spirit, I am free to live that love, and it's such a celebration to be free to do that. But while my spirit was in that safe, loving space, it was untouched. And in that safe, loving space, there's a knowing of the just a base knowing that is absolute peace, absolute joy, absolute love, and there's no way that the criminals that are in control of our information in our country right now could ever win. There's no way. It's as though, when you reduce everything down to an energy level of love or hate or good or bad or positive or negative, the duality of this world, however that would be perceived, is tipped ever so slightly to the good, and it's tipped to love. It's tipped to positive. That is the most powerful force in the universe. It's what keeps the earth spinning. It's what makes the motion. It's what gives the life. It's the thing, the very one thing that makes the difference. And it's like an example of that is the fact that if you're in a dark room and there's light outside, the light creeps under the door. But if you're in the light room, the dark does not creep under the door. Darkness cannot penetrate light. Light is the absolute. Light, love, positive, however, which way you want to put it, is tipped to the good. And when spirit is in a safe, loving space, the absoluteness, the completion of it, it's beautiful and it's pure. And people would not fear that anymore if they knew. It's religion that has put fear in us all, and by that fear, we're all being manipulated and controlled. We need to just get past that fear and get back to the reality, and when we do, we're going to find so much beauty and so much joy in life that fear is something that we just naturally aren't going to allow to happen.
They really underestimate us, don't they?
Yes, they do. They totally underestimate us, and it's because, good people can't really think like they do, and they can't think like we do because they don't think in terms of spirit. They're following a technological advanced computer that does not have spirit. And when you follow something that is that kind of a technological intelligence, then it doesn't have the depth and the span that humanity actually has with their strength of spirit and living true to soul. That's where they underestimate us. That's where we win and they lose. If they already know that in one regard, because otherwise mind control would not have to be their top secret weapon system. They wouldn't have to use it. They would realize that left to our own free thought and our own soul expression, that we are the most positive force in the universe. And that's what people need to reclaim. Everybody needs to think free again and reclaim that victory. I mean, it's our win. It's an absolute. It's already given, and we just need to reclaim it. As awareness is rising, this truth is making people free, and it is eroding their ability to control the population to the extent that they believed they could. Their plan, from what I saw from the inside, is not unfolding the way that they planned for it to, because they hadn't counted on this truth getting out there. And again, like you just brilliantly said, they underestimated us. They underestimated us all. So, come on, let's all just reclaim our lives and reclaim our victory and start living love and enjoying life again.
Let's celebrate. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Well, folks, you are listening to The Free Zone. I am your host, Freeman, and this is my exceptional guest, Cathy O'Brien. Absolutely take a look at her books, get yourself copies, get this information out there. Transformation of America, the early congressional hearings of Cathy O'Brien's mind control traumas, and then the most recent book, Access Denied for Reasons of National Security. This book I'm deep into, Cathy, and I hope we can speak for another hour. I have some more ideas and questions and thoughts. But people, you need to check out these books, absolutely. A documented journey from CIA mind control slave to successful U.S. government whistleblower. Cathy O'Brien is an amazing testament to how you can get through this. Our troubles seem trivial to her level of troubles, but yet they don't seem trivial to you. And I know this because I suffer right alongside of all of each and every one of you. So we're going to find our way, and we're going to seek these solutions, and we're going to push this understanding and knowledge out into the public, because as Cathy says, the truth is essential for ensuring that people know who the enemy is. I want to thank you all for tuning into The Free Zone. It is coming to you live every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I am now in South Carolina and changed my time zone, so check it out, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Free Zone is live. I hope that all of you will become subscribers to keep this show going. We will have a premium content member section getting filled very quickly, so please subscribe. Come over to freemantv.com. When we return with Cathy, we will be discussing some of the different methods of mind control that she has learned firsthand, and also get into the ideas of mind control coming through Hollywood programming and even our music and video games. And then, of course, we'll be digging much deeper into our solutions, because that's where it all lies, within our little inner child that needs to come back out and say hey to the world. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Boy, man, yeah, I love what you say and what you give. Ooh, this is powerful. This is fun.